Remember this guy?
Before I strike her down.
Patrick Macnee plays him, and also voices the machine commanding the enemy fleet. Same actor, two enemies. One voice tying the whole war together. We'll get back to that. 7 villains from kids' shows and primetime dramas. None needed blood or jump scares. They just needed you to believe them, and as a kid, you did. 1. The Master, Roger Delgado, Doctor Who, 1971 to 1973.
I am usually referred to as the Master.
Oh, is that so?
Universal.
Picture a man who smiles while everything around him falls apart. He never raises his voice. He barely needs to. Roger Delgado built the Master as the Doctor's equal. Same technology, same intelligence, aimed at the opposite goal. His weapon was eye contact, a stare that could take over your mind before you even noticed it happening.
Where did you get that?
The circus?
You underestimate me, Doctor. Let me be quite plain. Either you hand that unit over to me now, or I kill Miss Grant.
If you watched this as a kid, you probably didn't know his name, but you knew that stare, and you've carried it for 50 years without ever really thinking about it. Delgado and John Pertwee's Doctor were also close friends off camera. That real affection somehow made the rivalry feel more dangerous, not less. You could see two men who respected each other completely trying to destroy each other's plans anyway. He was reportedly set to get one more story, a script known as The Final Game. The story goes that it would have ended with the Master sacrificing himself to save the Doctor, leaving an old rivalry unresolved. Roger Delgado died in a car accident in Turkey in June of 1973 before a single frame was shot. The story was shelved and never finished. 2. The Fembots, The Bionic Woman and the $6 Million Man, 1976. Picture something that looks exactly like a person and feels nothing while doing what it was built to do. A scientist named Dr. Franklin built the Fembots after his own research got pushed aside in favor of bionics. He came back with a plan nobody at the OSI saw coming: kidnap Oscar Goldman and ransom him for a weather control device. This wasn't a single episode either. Kill Oscar spanned 3 parts across 2 different shows, back when a crossover that size was rare enough to feel like an event. Kids planned their whole week around catching every part.
The strange thing is that the wiring has a new type transistor which has only been on the market for the last 6 months.
It gives me the creeps that somebody's been watching.
These weren't robots that looked robotic. Several were built to impersonate real women closely enough to fool the people who loved them. Jamie Summers only caught on because her bionic hearing picked up on something that didn't belong. When she finally faced 2 of them, they overpowered her and left her for dead. If you felt a version of that same unease watching a deepfake or an AI voice clone for the first time, you weren't imagining a connection that isn't there. That's the same fear, 50 years apart. The machine never needed to look monstrous. It only needed to look familiar long enough to be trusted. 3. The Sleestak, Land of the Lost, 1974.
So that's a Sleestak, huh?
If you grew up on Saturday mornings, you already know the sound. That low hiss right before something steps out of the dark. They barely spoke at all. Slow-moving, reptilian, hunting the Marshall family through tunnels lit by nothing but torchlight. They didn't need dialogue to be terrifying. The silence did the work for them. The suits themselves were heavy rubber, built for actors who could barely see through the eye holes, filmed on a swamp set on a Los Angeles soundstage in blistering heat. None of that struggle shows up on screen. What you remember is the hiss, the dark, and the tunnel walls closing in. Decades later, the Sleestaks still show up on lists of the scariest thing on Saturday morning television. And most of the people making those lists were only 6 or 7 years old the first time they saw one. That's not a small thing. A hissing man in a rubber suit, filmed on a budget that barely covered the swamp set, planted something in a whole generation of kids that never fully left. 4. Sutekh, Doctor Who, Pyramids of Mars, 1975.
I can move again. I can move. Now all Thus we shall see who rules the cosmos.
Most Doctor Who villains want to conquer something. Sutekh wanted to end everything, and he said so, calmly, like it was already decided. He called himself Sutekh the Destroyer, an ancient being trapped for 7,000 years inside an Egyptian tomb, guarded by robot mummies built to enforce his will while he waited. His voice never rose above a whisper, and that was the point. He didn't need volume. He already believed he'd won.
No, you will not die yet. Identify yourself.
Gabriel Wolf voiced Sutekh with barely more than a whisper, and that restraint is exactly why it worked. The mummies never ran. They walked, slow and steady, and somehow that slowness made them worse, because you always knew they were still coming. This aired in an early Saturday evening slot, right before dinner, in millions of living rooms across Britain. Parents complained. Kids never forgot it. Decades later, fans still call it one of the most frightening things ever broadcast in a family time slot. 5. Morgan le Fay, Jessica Walter, Doctor Strange, 1978. Some villains never raise their voice. Jessica Walter didn't need to. A demonic entity called the Nameless One sent her to Earth with 3 days to destroy an aging sorcerer named Thomas Linmer, before he could pass his power to Stephen Strange. She used possession, seduction, direct magical combat, all of it delivered with the calm of someone who already expected to win. Most people who remember this film don't actually remember Doctor Strange. They remember her. The film itself never became the series CBS hoped for. It aired once, in September of 1978, and was gone. Jessica Walter's performance is the reason anyone still talks about it decades after the show it was meant to launch quietly disappeared. When she finally loses, she doesn't disappear. She resurfaces on television, restored to youth, presenting herself as a glamorous self-help guru already selling a new kind of influence to a mass audience. That's a villain who absorbed the loss and came back with better cover. 6. Servalan, Blake 7, 1978.
So tell me, Zen, how does one operate this craft?
One manipulates the controls and the craft functions accordingly.
Yes, and I've heard of your impudence. Now perhaps you will tell me how to manipulate the controls.
Manual operation is not possible without full pilot training.
Servalan made Darth Vader look like a good guy. She ran the Terran Federation with total calm, sending fleets and assassins after a small crew of rebels without ever losing her composure on camera. Jacqueline Pierce played her with a stillness that made every scene feel like a held breath.
Manual operation. Set course for the planet Earth. Computed and...
Her wardrobe alone made a statement. While the rebels wore worn, practical clothing, Servalan appeared in sleek white gowns that looked like they belonged in a different show entirely. That contrast was deliberate, and it worked exactly as intended. People around her did the shouting. She just watched and waited, and won more often than she lost. If you grew up in Britain in the late 70s, you probably remember being a little bit afraid of her and a little bit in awe of her at the same time, and just shows you don't need huge budgets to make memorable sci-fi. 7. Count Iblis, Battlestar Galactica, 1979.
You kill him!
Most villains announce themselves. Count Iblis did the opposite. He arrived dressed in white, speaking softly, offering miracles, and the unsettling part was how long it took anyone to realize what he actually was. Patrick Macnee brought a familiar warmth to the role. Audiences already knew him as the sophisticated John Steed from the Avengers, and that familiarity made Iblis easy to trust. Battlestar Galactica had already spent millions building spaceships and laser battles by this point in the season. This episode spent its budget on something simpler. A man in a white robe who never has to raise his voice. It's the more frightening choice by far.
Could you think me so foolish as to trust a man who would see his own race destroyed?
Not destroyed, subjugated, under me.
There can be no survivors.
Macnee also voiced the Cylon Imperious leader, the machine commander the fleet had been fighting since episode 1. When Baltar recognizes Iblis's voice as the same voice, the show never fully explains why. The implication just sits there, unresolved. Iblis's influence may reach all the way back to the Cylons' ancient origins. Did you just get the chills all over again? So tell us, which one still lives somewhere in the back of your head?